Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Race Rep Interviews Alliance Edition. Hello, everyone, welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Human Race Rep Interviews. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Mordrime. I'm pretty much known on the server by my main Gabriel Mordrime and his crustacean companion Wilhelm, but today I'm on my other main, Alia Bellegarde.
Can't believe Alia didn't bring the crustacean companion for us to see, but it's okay. Thank you for taking the time to do this. We greatly appreciate it. And we're going to move on to your next question. What made you choose your race?
Honestly, I kind of got fed into the Warcraft pipeline of first Warcraft 2 with orcs and humans, then Warcraft 3 came out, and when the RTS scene was still alive, I pretty much heavily played humans because I loved their motif. You had knights, paladins, wizards, all that sorcery. So when World of Warcraft came out, I was one of the many that fell right into the pipeline with paladins, and that was and still kind of is my main on World of Warcraft, and it's pretty much been like that ever since then. I've branched out a little bit with Alia here, obviously, along with a few other mains I've tinkered with, but it's always been that kind of focus on the RTS roots of Warcraft that kept me around with them.
And humans do have, like you were saying, the very like classic fantasy tropes of like the knights and the wizards and the paladins. It's all very kind of low fantasy with the humans, which is very nice. Is a lot of what you said also what makes you passionate about that race? Do you want to expand on your passion for role playing a human?
Sure thing. I guess obviously a lot of people tend to say that humans are the quote unquote boring choice in roleplay because they're humans, but I feel like that's kind of a bit of a disservice to the context of them because obviously they're humans, but they don't exactly have the one to one translation of human experience in real life, especially with how you can probably construe the story of humans throughout the timeline of Warcraft, where you have this cultural divide. Oh, I'm sorry, not cultural, generational divide that's between the old graybeards that have had this context of a world before Warcraft, pun intended, where everything was all right before, for want of a better term, the high fantasy exploded and they had to roll with the punches. And you have a generation, which are the characters I play with Ali and Mord, that grew up on the fulcrum of that, where that age is disappearing and they're starting to kind of come into their own and exist in a time where the paradigms that their families knew is gone and they're pretty much building their own in real time along with everything else that's happening as they're being introduced to the wider world, the eldritch horrors that are lurking in all the shadows, and kind of learning how to change that archetypal fantasy beginning into something that works more for them.
It's very true. They're always like expanding and evolving and moving along with the times. You know, there's not really many old school humans left. Everyone's kind of used to toying around with skyships and spaceships and beings of other galaxies and stuff now. Nothing's really rooted in their homes and their beginnings. That leaves a lot of opportunity for, expanding the human lore.
Indeed, it's been kind of fun since I've been around on the scene ever since 2009. So it's while World of Warcraft's been growing with the introduction of more and more high fantasy elements, there's also been that kind of real time change as first with Mord and then later Alia, they kind of have to roll with these new punches that are coming. And even though they kind of have that mindset from the past that has to be adapted, they still have that snapshot that younger role players and younger characters in human roleplay don't really have. It's kind of like that for a real life comparison. It's kind of like growing up in the 90s and going into the 2000s, where you have that old technology and cultural paradigm, and it's changing along with you, and you kind of have to roll with it.
Yeah, there's a big shift happening for sure. And, with that shift might come a lot of changes, like not lore wise, but also gameplay wise, which kind of leads into my next question of if humans could be any class that isn't already in the game, it could be from any fantasy thing ever. What class would you pick?
Oh man, we already have so many that are in the game, but obviously I'm probably going to join the crowd that is still clamoring for tinkers in World of Warcraft. Or at least some kind of artificer like we have in D&D, where you can fiddle with technology and gizmos in a more of a class setup compared to just little toys with engineering.
That does seem to be the next class that a lot of people want to see. There's been a lot of illustrations on the interwebs about it and a lot of hype for sure. I know every expansion people tend to put out like a fake, hey guys, look, here's the new Tinkerer class.
Yep.
And maybe one day it'll be there. Artificer slash Tinkerer is definitely a very good choice. There's a lot that could be done with that. And who knows what the future might hold.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have probably been around World of Warcraft long enough that a lot of the things that we thought would be just what could have been in the past have now been realized in the future, like elves for both factions, the gradual opening up of classes like paladins and warlocks for other races. Just stick around, it might happen.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. And speaking of future and past, humans have a lot of new characters being introduced, have had a lot of characters return. Um, Out of all of the human characters in World of Warcraft, which is your favorite lore character?
That's a toughie, just because of how many there are.
There are a lot. This is not an easy question for sure.
if I had, if I did have to pick though, probably Anduin Lothar from the old days back in Warcraft 1 and 2.
Anduin Lothar is a very good pick for sure.
Definitely. He was this character that was arguably larger than life in how the lore portrayed him as this old guard that was trying to basically not grasp for power so much as just try to keep everything um, from falling apart in the face of an invasion from the orcs, along with having his entire kingdom get destroyed around him. And through that, he basically managed to do a lot of political willing and dealing, but not in a way that's kind of slimy that we'd kind of expect from more Game of Thrones, but more in a way that's in the old fantasy archetype of using power to protect others. And through that all, he kept fighting on and inspiring people to the point where even when he was killed by Orgrim Doomhammer, his death wasn't something that was a demoralizing moment so much as a rallying point that inspired others like Turalyon to live up to his legacy. And I think that's kind of why I like him a lot. It's not just the character, but also the fact that he's like this archetype of old that's lionized, probably has his lower qualities kind of forgotten as his legend grows, but is kind of like this cultural touchstone of knights and warrior role players to draw upon.
Yeah, that's very true. Like he used a lot of his power grabs to protect the kingdom that he was very passionate about, that he loved, and the people that he loved. So it's just a strong, well-rounded character, all around.
Absolutely. He's definitely one character that has arguably survived the test of time in terms of Warcraft lore.
Too true, too true. Well, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for doing this, and we will see you during the opening ceremony for the Tournament of Ages.
Thanks for having me, and I'll see you then.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Dark Iron Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Magnar Arshambrew, the Dark Iron Race Rep for this year, and a couple years running now.
Thanks for taking the time to do this. We're going to jump right into your first question. What made you choose Dark Iron as your race?
Um, honestly, it kind of started out as a joke. Honestly, I thought it would be funny to have a quite literal hot-headed dwarf, someone who was pretty, angry, huffy, not really in tune with, being serene as a monk. I kind of figured it would be cool to subvert expectations.
Just really putting the Angie dwarf cliche to work, huh? You're
Yeah,
just the,
but he's pretty much grown out of it over the years, for the most part. Unless it came to his wife, she's kind of really put that to the test over the years, hasn't she?
yeah, they tend to do that, but I'm gonna let her take it away with your next question.
What makes you so passionate about this race?
I do like how they actually have built it up, at least with the recent stories. With the possibility of change, I feel like in recent times, they've gotten a little stagnant with other races. Looking at you a little bit there, Caldori, they've kind of stuck with their guns a little bit with, um, sticking with tradition, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like with, the recent short stories that, have come out, they're looking to change the dwarves overall, and I kind of admire that, and I think the Dark Irons are, you know, have been the ones to show the most change out of most of the races in the Warcraft universe.
Yeah, I could agree with that. There's definitely been a lot of development for the Dark Iron over the years. They're not just that enemy that tried to invade Ironforge while they had a leader on the Council of Three Hammers in Ironforge. They're now like that group who, throughout all the expansions, even before they were officially a part of the Alliance, really stepped up their game. Like during Mists of Pandaria, there's a scenario where like the Council of Three Hammers is like, nah, we're just gonna close up the mountain, and like the Zandalari could run rampant throughout Khazmodan and variants trying to convince them. And Moira's like, nah, the Dark Iron's got this. We'll go and deal with it. While the Wildhammer and Bronzebeard are just like, whatever, you do you.
Yep.
Then obviously we see them in like Draenor, right? Thalen and Hansel come in and really help out a lot in Draenor, and then they join the Alliance. And honestly, they've been a major player throughout the entire time that they've been in the Alliance. They haven't just sat in the shadows, really. There's been a lot of development, and I'm interested to see what they're going to do with Dagran in the War Within.
Yeah, they definitely have really done a lot more than some of the other races I've noticed. So I do admire that a lot. I do like that progression that they've put out there.
Yeah, it's been really great to see, honestly. So now, dwarves in general tend to have a majority of the WoW classes unlocked. We're only missing like not even a handful. But if you could be a class from any fantasy setting, any video game, it doesn't have to be World of Warcraft, what class would you like to see dwarves get, and which one would you be?
I mean, I would personally just stick with monk, but that's just because I clearly have a favorite. Usually when I play any sort of D&D or Pathfinder class, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be monk. I'm not crazy about spellcasters. I do like the idea of just grumpy masters of serenity, people overcoming that sort of that struggle within, and kind of taking that anger rather than just kind of fighting with it, just using it to their advantage. But I guess if I had to choose one that you don't really see often, I guess, or one you see in World of Warcraft, seeing a bard would be kind of neat. One that sings awfully would be kind of cool. I would love to see a bard tank, just one that sings so bad it just kind of taunts the enemies around you. Just kind of like it really just makes the person you're fighting really want to attack you. It just kind of draws that attention, and it's like, stop singing, for the love of God, please stop singing, and it just punches that bard. I would love to see that. Just I really like funny things like that.
Like a bard that's so obnoxious you want to just punch him in the face. I dig
Oh yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Give me a kazoo bard.
All right. Mira, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
Out of all of them, I had a feeling you would, in fact, choose Bard.
Oh yeah.
I feel like Bard's a class that not a lot of people tend to gravitate towards for this question. Because I guess they're more used to it just being like the singing, lute playing character, when in like actual reality, Bards were archers that would like sing to the frontline troops to lift morale and try and get the sway of the battle to their favor. You know, they weren't just walking around. Like battle bard was kind of an actual thing.
Yeah.
Not that they were called battle bards, but it was really just archers that would go around the field of like medieval battles and sing to the troops to boost morale. So it's cool to see it as a choice. I think dwarf would definitely work really well at being that like antagonistic bard that's just like, why don't you come over here and do it, get in my face, you know, do something about it. And
They'd be very good at antagonizing people, distracting, and of course I would pick it. I'm very charismatic.
True.
This is
You
true.
are good at getting people in the knees.
Uh-huh.
Taking them out from the knees.
That being said, of all of the Dark Irons, who happens to be your favorite lore character?
The one that isn't even technically a Dark Iron, Moira. You know, I mean, she's kind of been inducted, because, you know, she married the big high Dark Iron himself. I do like how she just kind of, you know, forced herself in there, and became queen. I do really like a fish out of water story, as a couple people around Moonguard know. It's something that I, you know, hold near and dear to my heart. I like how she just kind of came in there, got kind of very, you know, angry that her husband was killed, and, you know, saw it as a chance to kind of, you know, rule the Dark Irons with a iron fist, you know, get revenge on her father. And of course, she had a change of heart, you know, towards the end. To an extent, she's still, you know, very upset with her father. But I do like how she just kind of took that mantle and, you know, became leader of 2 seats on the Council of Three Hammer. You know, I kind of thought it was kind of a cool angle they went about it.
Yeah, her story is
Okay.
one that's pretty interesting because obviously, like, she didn't willingly go to Shadowforge. She was kidnapped by Thorison
Yes.
and kind of like magically convinced to fall in love with him, and then ends up actually falling in love with him, having the kid, and then like he dies. And instead of just being like, I'm gonna go back home to my mountain with my people, she takes up the mantle of ruler of the Dark Iron and sees their corrupt nature because of the Fire Lord and all this stuff, and how she could turn it to good for the world. So her story is definitely one that's like this huge dip of like, what the heck's happening here, to like one of the best stories that's going on right now, I would say. It was quite the turn, but it did a lot of good for her people.
Unfortunately, it's kind of slim pickings with how many Dark Irons there are out there right now, but hopefully there's a couple more here in the future with the War Within coming out.
And the ones that we do have, we don't really have a whole bunch of lore on, really, but you know,
No, there's not much.
we'll maybe we'll get more. We are kind of getting a dwarfy-esque expansion coming up, so that'd be cool. With that being said, thank you so much, Mag, for taking the time to do this. We greatly appreciate it.
Of course. It's always good to be here.
And we will see you with the rest of the race reps at the opening ceremonies. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Dwarf Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hey there. So I am Mordecai Snowbeard, the dwarf racial rep for this year.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. We're going to jump into the first question. What made you choose Dwarf as your race?
I mean, it really depends on how much time we have for the interview. Truth be told, I have been dwarf obsessed for as far back as I can remember, all the way back in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, where my brother and I would play the trial accounts, and 9 times out of 10 it would be dwarves. Shout out to Ulfgar Frostbeard. But it's been dwarf for years upon years upon years.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you. I've been a Dwarf fan ever since I was a wee lad and reading The Lord of the Rings and being like, Gimli's epic, and then playing all these games that have dwarfs in them. They've just been amazing. So, since you've been a dwarf fan for so long, what's made you so passionate about dwarves?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure where I can really place it down into kind of like one point. I suppose it'd be, their sense of like family-esque, where, leave no one behind, stand up for those that you can, be strong for others, not to mention their absolute stubbornness, their drive to do as best they can, and just inability to say, we give up.
They do be stubborn. This is true. They have a strong will, I would say. There are people that endures no matter what and will make their own path forward to that. They'll do what they need to do. And
100%.
we've seen this in many fantasy settings, like obviously Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit, having moved from Erebor to the Blue Mountains. Then in World of Warcraft, we have the War of Three Hammers, which was a civil war that took me a minute. I blanked on the name, which was a civil war between the 3 clans. Bronzebeards kicked everyone else out. Wildhammer found their home, which then the Dark Irons corrupted, and they had to move deeper into the Twilight Highlands and even to Airy Peak, right? And then you've had the Dark Irons who have thrived in their mountain under basically being enthralled by the Fire Lord. So you just see their resilience through this game in general.
100%.
Now, that being said, dwarves have a lot of class options in World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has a lot of the typical fantasy class tropes. If you could be any class from any fantasy setting, MMORPG, which class would you like to be and like to see dwarves get?
So, truth be told, what I've always kind of hoped and what I've always wanted to happen, specifically for World of Warcraft, if we're going to pick these classes, shamans to get a tank spec. I would play shaman all day, every day, nothing else, no problem, easy peasy. But because we don't, I would very happily play a druid, World of Warcraft wise, or if they had almost like a separate subsection of paladin for like clerics, even if cleric was like its own subclass.
I'm biased by clerics. That's what I played in D&D when I picked my dwarf. Druids has been very common so far of an answer, which I mean, it's a great answer because, like I said to everyone else so far, as a druid, we get to show off our race through our class with our forms, right? So our travel form would be a ram. Our bear form would be one of the bears from Dunmurrow. We'd have the snow leopards, a wolf, that sort of thing, right? Like, there's just so much that you could speak through your class-wise, like, and show people what your race is all about, right?
Even not even just that, like that would be so specific to just like Dunmurrow. Imagine if they gave us glyphs or that kind of stuff to represent like, griffins as your flying form, or having like a stag as your travel form for the Wildhammers.
I would say griffins would most definitely be the flying form no matter what, even with the Dark Irons. It's just so
100%.
associated to dwarves as a whole that it would be crazy not to have that as the flying form. With that being said, that's the class that we'd pick. Both of them great picks. My cleric in D&D, I was a life cleric for my dwarf, and my deity of choice was the Raven Queen.
Oh, that's excellent.
So when I did I forget the move, but like you conjure a bunch of spirits, and if you walk towards people, it does damage. Because they like fly around you. I forget what it's called, but my DM had it to where they were not just like regular spirits, but they were spirit ravens. So that was pretty cool.
I think it's Spirit Guardians. I
Yeah.
also main cleric whenever playing D&D, but I'm usually actually a light or a war cleric.
Ooh, war cleric is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the dwarves have been a forefront in World of Warcraft since its inception, really. They're in the vanilla trailer, they're on box art, they've got quite a bit of lore, they're on the load screen. That being said, throughout the history of WoW, we've had many dwarven lore characters come and go. We still have some that are mainstay, that are maybe worse sub characters that are now being raised up to main characters. Which dwarf lore character would you say is your favorite?
So definitely kind of almost not necessarily in the shadows, but I would say Bran Bronzebeard, mostly because Magni, very obviously, the speaker, he's turned to diamond. He had a very big like forefront position in Legion, BFA, and that kind of stuff. Muradin, one of the reps on the Council of Three Hammers, took over, was the Frostborn King. Both of them, huge parts and stories and grand positions. Bran was never a king. Bran was never a great warrior, at least, as far as my iterations go. But it still proves that regardless of your ability to have power or your ability to have might, you still have extreme importance in the mundane and the normalcy.
I could not agree more. Like you were saying, Bran obviously isn't as skilled of a warrior as his brothers, at least from what we know. He seems like more of a rogue in game, but he went out on his own. He made the Explorers League. He went and made a name for himself. He discovered the Titans' faith, basically, for the dwarves by uncovering all these relics and bringing that faith back and finding the roots of where his people came from.
Exactly.
So even though he wasn't a great king or anything, the significance he made to their culture is bigger than what any king could have done.
Exactly. I agree.
The Bronzebeards are just getting it done, apparently. You must be excited for you must be excited for Moira and Dagran stuff, though, for the War Within.
Honestly, I have purposely I did see that there was the short story that was put out. I have almost purposely ignored or tried to ignore as much of the story-wise aspects of what's been kind of released or what's been kind of given to us. The gameplay aspect and like mechanics and that kind of stuff I've kind of been looking at because that's just enjoyable. I really want to, for the first time, actually read quest text, read dialogue, listen to them talk. And I'm very excited, even though I know a little bit, very excited to see what actually happens between Moira and now Dagran.
Yeah, I've done the same. I didn't read the short story. I haven't looked into any of the stuff. I don't even play betas for when the expansions come out, so I'm very excited to see where this is going to go and to finally have Dagran how he's supposed to look and not just be a little potato with a mustache inside of a crib. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. We greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies.
Right on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Kul Tiran Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going? Waylon Fletcher, the Guildmaster of the Kul Tiran's 10th Fleet.
Thank you, Waylon, for taking the time to come and do this interview. I'm going to jump right into the first question, which is what made you choose Kul Tiran as your race of choice?
There's two main things, really, but right off the bat, I generally play a lot of druids, and those druid forms just kind of caught my eye as the coolest thing that had ever been added in for that class. So that right there just grabbed my attention. And the fact that since Wrath, I've wanted to play Vrykul, but this is the kind of the closest thing you can get to that, kind of like a large, non-pretty alliance race.
Yeah, those wicker forms for druids are honestly like probably one of my favorite things about Kul Tirans. I like the wicker bird form that you get, that wicker crow. I find it very cool. I mean, all the forms are amazing. The thorn speakers, just an amazing thing as well. And like you said, we don't have Rykul, but we got big badasses anyways in the form of Kul Tirans. So it's kind of like that middle ground that we'll have to get for now until maybe one day we get maybe a giant cosmetic or the Vrykul added in or something like that. But nah, yeah, the forms 10 out of 10, and the Kul Tirans themselves are pretty cool. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Now just to expand on that, what makes you so passionate about the Kul Tirans?
So there's a lot to kind of unpack there. Right off the bat, Kul Tiran itself is kind of very model of a colonial, like seaside New England town or setting. And being from New England myself, it's a huge draw. It has this sort of coming home, like homey feel to it all. Added to that, it's kind of a low fantasy location in a high fantasy world. And then Borealis, out of all the main cities, just feels so much more alive and complete with a lot of the NPCs walking around and just a ton of theme and thematic stuff that's happening.
I feel like Borealis, even to this day, every time I go back, I'm finding something that I didn't notice when it was like a main city hub back in BFA. And I'm just like, oh, that's new. Or I find an NPC that I didn't see, and I'm like, wait, what? And then like they all have unique dialogue. You could talk to people, you could go around, do things. There's hidden clubs. It's just a great city overall. And I like that you mentioned that it gives you like a connection to home and that you could resonate with that feeling of like your New England roots and just seeing everything and being like, yeah, no, I have a personal connection with this. It's really cool.
Yeah, even beyond that, like once you start getting into the zones and things like that, again, it kind of has that homey New England vibe. Like one of the zones, Drustvar, is really heavy with like the Salem witch trials, and then you've got Storm Song, which has that search for like a fertile land, a great place to kind of grow and expand. And then, of course, you have Beauregard, which, how can you have that kind of a setting without pirates?
Yeah, Tierguard is literally just like the base pirate like place. Honestly, you look at it and you're like, if there aren't pirates here, this is a crime. They need to be here. This screams pirates. But like out of all the zones, like I remember when we were able to pick what zone we wanted to go into, the first zone I chose to go through was Stormsong. I was just like, this zone looks beautiful. It's amazing. It reminds me of some of the zones from like Mists of Pandaria, like the Valley of the Four Winds. And it just, something about it resonated with me. The entire the entirety of Kul Tiran as a whole is just a beautiful place.
Yeah, and there's just then you get into like the style of the people and everything else. It's the background of what the Kul Tirans are. Seafarers from Gilneas, mixed with the very same race that I wanted to play, the Vrykul. And they're this very salt of the earth kind of people, very self-sufficient, strong-willed, and there's always this undercurrent of if we can't do this, then it can't be done.
There's a very like headstrong mentality with the Kul Tiran. Some might call it stubborn, some might call it just strong of will and determination, but they're just a great, addition to the game. I think it took too long for us to get them, especially since we've known of them for so long, and obviously we got to see dialogue with like Dalen Proudmore in one of the Warcraft games, which I didn't play, but I'm referencing because I know. And yeah, no, it's great to see them, and it's great to have people that are so passionate about them. The Kul Tirans, I think a lot of people see them through the Thorn Speakers. So Druid is a very popular class, but if you could pick any class from World of Warcraft, the WoW RPG, or any fantasy setting, like what class would you like to see the Kul Tirans get and why?
I actually put a little bit more thought into this, and I generally play druids because obviously, as I said, the forms are really cool, and that whole thorn speaker vibe really draws to me. But on top of it, more thought I gave to the question. I was thinking, honestly, a more of a bard archetype, not necessarily as like the, going out and singing songs and being all flamboyant, but the idea of a person sitting in a tavern telling tall tales or singing shanties, kind of like an inspiration and encouragement to their allies, and then they always have this have to know everything kind of vibe about them. So, they're a bit nosy with their fingers in every pie.
Okay, I think that's a very good choice. I like the whole they need to have their fingers in every pie sort of vibe, and then also just them singing sea shanties because they're sailors. What are they going to do when they're out on their boats? They're probably going to be working and singing while they work. They got to do something to keep themselves entertained through maybe months upon months of seafaring voyages, right? So I could see
Yeah,
that.
just to kind of fit, and they have a ton of those really cool, like you'd mentioned, this tavern that you didn't realize existed since the zone came out. You just kind of stumble across it, and there's all these really cool nicks and crannies, and kind of just ties into all that.
Yeah, and in almost every one of the taverns, there is someone singing. I think one of the taverns is just straight up like a dance club, if I remember. There's like a dance floor and there's people in there partying, so you could tell that they're very jovial and they like their music. And we know that they're good pickpockets because, I mean, we got, Flame Fairwind out of it. So
Exactly.
it's just in their nature as pirates, as a people, I suppose. With that being said, since BFA, we've seen a lot of new faces for Kul Tirans. We've also seen some old faces for Kul Tirans that we might have thought were dead or were never going to show up again or were lost to eternity and probably forgotten in the deep, dark dungeons that is Blizzard's catalog of lore. Who, out of all the Kul Tirans, would you say is your favorite lore character?
I kind of agonized over this one and had to come up with two actually instead of just the one. But first and foremost, Cyrus Crestfall. He's kind of the embodiment of everything of what it is to be a Kul Tiran. He is one of Daelin's most trusted knights. He's the harbor master in Borealis who tells you stories of the different islands when you start questing there. And the idea is he gave up so much for the nation. He was the foster father of Talia Fordragon, Bolvar's daughter, and he honored his promise to take care of her. And then when it came time for like the Ashbane situation, he was there reminding everybody just where their loyalties truly belonged and that it was the Proudmoors that they should stand behind. And on top of it all, kind of going back to the whole bard concept, he kind of has his eyes and ears everywhere, especially with characters like the aforementioned Flynn. He's kind of like the unofficial spy master. He's got everything there, and he's got a little bit of information on everybody. So, and everything he does, it's all for the love of Kul Tiras.
Yeah, you could really tell that just through everything he does too, and especially that moment that you mentioned where, Gen and them are showing up, and then the guards are pretty much telling them that they can't pass, and they're probably gonna very likely arrest them. And then he comes out, and he's like, "Do you wear Ashvane's crest on your shield? Do you take orders from them? Do you serve them? No, that's a Proudmoor shield. You serve the House of Proudmoor. I am the harbor master. It is my say. Y'all follow my orders." They're free to come through into the office and everything. It's just that scene alone had so much tension and just so much good things come out of it.
Yeah, and he just kind of takes control of everything and makes sure that things stay on the straight and narrow how they should.
Exactly.
The second one is really kind of vague, especially when it comes to lore. Is Seth Ewen, really only mentioned in an enchanting quest, and then later in one of the most recent chronicles, she was one of the Drust originally on Kul Tiras who had helped organize and lead the Thorn Speakers against Gorak Tull, and he had caught her and punished her by sending her out into the wilderness and then having her murdered, so that her spirit would be trapped to wander for eternity and witness all of the things that he was doing to the Kul Tiran people in his war against the humans. As being a Thorn Speaker role player, she's kind of one of the first heroes of the Thorn Speakers, and kind of just stood up against what was going on, and is what led to how the culture itself is now.
So even though she's a very minor character, you could tell that she did very major things, right? Just through the very small samples that we got of the lore. I liked that they did that, and they gave a minor character, just even if it's a tiny little paragraph in like Chronicles 4 or something. I like that they put these things in and expand upon the lore and give us all these amazing characters who might not have been on the main stage but still had a pivotal part to play.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just kind of, I said, it was just kind of this brief thing in the Chronicles and this enchanting quest where the whole basis of it was she wanted you to help her build a wicker construct body for her so she could possess it and continue her work. So it was kind of a really unique and interesting look into how that all goes.
Also, that's just kind of badass, like getting a giant wicker body to like go and like mess up more of Goraktul's forces, or just help the Kul Tiran people as a whole, or even the Thorn Speakers. Like, just this huge dominating structure, right?
That for sure.
Awesome. Well, Wellen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
I appreciate it so much. I enjoyed our conversation, and we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies.
Sounds great. We'll see you then.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Worgen Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am the player behind Tiran Shadowmist. I represent the Kingdom of Gilneas community, but we work with quite a few people that are also like Worgen related. We've done some stuff with Duskwood. We've had every so often stuff with like Brayden's book, just kind of all over the place.
Very nice. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm going to jump in with our first question of what made you choose Worgen as your race of choice?
So, interesting question. So originally, when I was playing, I was actually a raider at the time. I did do roleplay, but I did a lot of raiding as well. And I also did PvP, and I was like, man, it'd be really cool if I could like get a sprint of some kind, because at the time, I don't know if you've ever played Death Knight, but up until maybe the last like 4 years, we've been kind of, shall we say, not the fastest of classes. And so the idea of having a 2-minute cooldown sprint was pretty good. And then, the crit was nice, and as a blood decay, that was, translates directly into parry and, all that fun stuff. So yeah, it was originally it was for the PvE aspects, but I also just, I kind of fell in love with them after that.
Yeah, no, I get your pain on that Death Knight point for sure, because for a little bit I did kind of dabble for, in PvP with the Death Knight, and there's only so much range your Death Grip gets you, right? So that ratio for the Worgen of being able to sprint definitely comes in handy, especially for like, the PvP map of Eye and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a warrior, I do kind of feel the pain of being a bit slow. I get my leap, but a lot of the times I don't talent into the double leap with the speed. I usually do that when I play like Cartball or something, which it's been a while. But yeah, no, I get that pain of being slow. So it's an interesting how like you solely used it for like that one perk, and then you're like, I actually kind of like this, and I think I'm gonna keep it.
Yeah, I did really like that. It was also just convenient because my first Worgen character I ever made was actually a rogue, and they had a skinning bonus back then.
Ooh, way back in
So
the day.
it was like bonuses too. But then as time went on, I had always been like kind of furry, and then like I was kind of like not wanting to play a Worgen because that's a little bit on the nose for some people. But then I was like, you know what? I don't care what people think. It's fine. I just love their aesthetic. All that fun stuff.
Yeah, in the end, you know what? You got to do what you want to do, right? You can't let people stop you from doing that. And I'm hearing a lot of good things, a lot of awesome things. So I'm going to jump into the next question, which is what makes you so passionate about Worgen, because I'm hearing the excitement behind your voice. So expand on that.
It's definitely partially that. Obviously, like I do like some of the customization. The visual update for Worgen was absolutely kind to us. Like I've loved seeing the fur patterns. I've loved seeing the like different ways you can make the snout look. Like there's just so many cool things you can do with it. I am holding out. Someday maybe Chris Metzen will change his mind and give us tails, because there are several animations we have that look like we should have a tail and we don't have one. And obviously the tech is there because Volpera have tails and Draenei have tails. So clearly it's something that they can do. It's a matter of whether or not they will do it because, werewolves, but magic werewolves that are supposed to be pack form druids. I don't know. It's always been kind of weird.
Yeah, totally. And as soon as you mentioned cosmetics, in my mind, I'm like, I have to mention the whole Tales for Druids, for Worgens thing. And then you brought
Yeah.
it up, and I was just like, hey, I knew what you were getting into talking to. But like honestly, the customizations have been very, very kind to Worgens. I think the female Worgen model looks a lot better than it did. I think it was kind to the male Worgen model. Honestly, like the beard that you have right now is the beard that I like to rock when I make a Worgen.
Oh man. So the one thing I wish I could do with it is dwarves have a lot of really cool like beard jewelry stuff, and I would really like to be able to use some of that like with this beard. Cuz canonically, like in Tivarn's art, the beard is braided and it has stuff in the beard. So I love how that looks on a Worgen.
You're stepping into my turf. Now you're gonna take all my cosmetics.
Hey, so somebody some time ago, someone linked me like all of the D&D races as werewolves, and the dwarf werewolf is shockingly close to how I had Tivarn before I had any art for him. Because he's a blacksmith. Like, he's a blacksmith, he's a pantheonic, he's on good terms with the dwarves. So he is a very dwarfy Worgen.
I feel like facial hair cosmetics is just an update that we need across the board because like we just need more love. I've made probably one character of every race and it's just not there, So it'd be great to see Worgen get more cosmetics, of course. It would be great to see everyone get more cosmetics, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. And I think so. Like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because I think that Blizzard is going in the direction of realizing cosmetics are more valuable than they gave it credit before. Because previously it's like, oh well, cosmetics can't compete with like a dungeon or like a quest line or something. But like that dungeon or quest line, sure, like a percentage of people will do that. But you know how many people customize their characters? Literally everybody when they make one. So like
And the barbershops are always full. Every time I go into a barbershop, those chairs are packed. So it's like people
I'm
spend a
still
lot
waiting
of
for the
time.
day. I'm waiting for the day we get an 8 million gold barbershop mount.
Oh jeez, just bring the barbershop on the go. And we have to have that, like, the barbershop, like, candy cane thing that's outside that goes up and down. It's got to
Absolutely.
be on the mount. But just to move on to our next question, because I'm sure we could spend hours talking about cosmetics that every race needs and deserves. The Worgen have a pretty decent class combination. Like, you guys have a decent amount that you could pick, right, in the game. But if you could take any of the World of Warcraft classes, any of the MMORPG book classes from like the non-canonical books from ye olden days, or any fantasy genre that there is, what class would you like to see the Worgen get?
You threw me a curveball with offering me non-WoW classes. Okay. Well, so WoW class wise, I think the only ones that we don't have at this point are Paladin and Shaman and Evoker. Like Paladin would be fun. I know a lot of people in the Kingdom of Gilneas who would love to have a Paladin. I personally lean towards not Dwarf, Shaman. You're just talking about dwarves. I lean towards Shaman because there's so many cool ideas that you could have for like the totems. I know like I've seen some people talk about like Goldrin carved totems. I've seen people talk about imagine having like oil lamp posts as your totem and you throw down like a little lamp post.
Yeah, I feel like shamans get brought up in the same sense that druids get brought up because of the customization behind it, right? Like, obviously, druids have their unique forms, shamans have their unique totems. So, the oil lamp would just be like so ye old and British. It would make sense because it suits it, but also Goldrin would be amazing, like carved wolf totems.
It would be so cool. Now, I will say, outside of WoW classes, if I can add one more, there is a class from the RPG, and if you don't know, I wrote several years ago an entire system for using Vrykul styled runes, because my character's like the least Death Knight you could be, besides being a like prodigy blood decay. He just makes weapons and then learned how to do runes from the Vrykul in Northrend. And I used the Runecaster from the Warcraft RPG as the basis. The idea that you would have a family of runes, and then you would have tiers of that rune. So you could have like a rune that's like, oh, this is your defensive rune. So it's like the first layer of a turtle shell. And then you'd have like the second layer of the turtle shell and the third layer of the turtle shell. And it creates this cool, intricate pattern. But like, I love the idea of the evoker's press and hold system for casting, and that would lend itself so well to a runecaster type character.
Ooh, yeah, I like that a lot, especially since it's like how much like energy you channel into the rune would then affect the would make the rune's effectiveness, right? Like better and stronger. Ooh, yeah. No, I think
There's also just
Runecaster's
like
a very great idea too.
There's also just like a ton of cool lore around like the idea of rune casting, and like it's kind of grown a little bit over time. Like I think I don't know how much of it's specifically changed because of the books in the Legion Dalaran, but I know that there's like some references still to how it used to be, and like there's this idea that like a rune is just a manifestation of a location. So like a fire rune can be from the heart of Blackrock Mountain, or you could have a storm rune that's from the Maelstrom. And it's just you're pulling energy from the ley lines, and that's so cool to me. That's why I made it my RP character's like whole magic dynamic.
That's actually pretty wild, and I didn't know that. So it just imagine pulling energy from the heart of Blackrock Mountain, like how much heat that would pull out from your ability. Like, oh,
Exactly.
that is wild. And doing
It's so
that as
cool.
like with the evoker's channel, right? Like each channel would make the heat stronger and like the firepower stronger.
Exactly.
Oh,
I love that conceptually.
it's getting my brain all like working overtime right now. Like, the gears are once again turning and the steam's coming out. Huh. Yeah, there's so many interesting and like intricate classes that are in like the RPG or like twists on current classes that we have that Blizzard has as non-canon that should just be brought in, man. Like the more the merrier.
Absolutely.
It's just bring it on. Give us Runecaster, give us Runemaster. Like obviously there's a lot of races that work with runes, dwarves being one of them, and like the earthen and all the titans races basically work with runes, so it's like just give it to us.
Just it'd be so cool. Or at least give me like what I wanted Inscription to be was you can use consumables that are runes.
Yeah, because Inscriptionist right now is what you make staffs and glyphs. Is that what Inscription is? That's what it used to be. So I'm like, what use do we have for this profession right now?
Oh, and I guess the missives for the specific stats for crafting, but I would still like some kind of cool consumable.
I feel like they could take like Inscription and turn it around to be something way more than it is, that has more to do with actual runes and all that sort of stuff than just we write on parchment and build wooden staffs for people. Like, yeah, that's a
So
good
true.
choice. I like that choice a lot. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a wonderful time talking with you.
It was great to talk to you, Ultron. Always a pleasure.
We will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremony.
Have a good one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages High Elf Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I go by Ains based on my old main on the server, but this is my High Elf Denori Flare Switch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Denori, and we're going to jump right into the questions. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. So, what made you choose High Elf as your race?
Before I ever started playing World of Warcraft, I played Warcraft like all the way through many, many times, and I was always interested in the race before I even played WoW. And then once I started playing WoW, I believe it was really solidly in Wrath, and there was all of the aesthetics you could find in the High Elf towns, as few as there were, spread between Azeroth and especially here in Northrend. The aesthetics were just fantastic, and I loved the colors, and that was sort of where the love of it began. I think that's the best way to go about it, because every time I go back and I go through the zones. Sometimes I'll just quest through an entire continent just for fun. I do it with Northrend mostly, and I just love running into those high elf settlements and doing them again and again, and because the story is always very rich, and it reminds me of when I was playing Warcraft.
The stories for the High Elves are always very great, and their ruins of their civilizations are just very nice to look at and explore. You could tell that the architecture was just really, really important to the civilization as a whole. And, you know, in Wrath, obviously, we had the Silver Covenant square, which is now the Grey Fang Enclave, or whatever it is, in New Dalaran, but Old Dalaran, High Elves were everywhere, right? So, and
Right.
like you said, through Warcraft 1 to 3, we saw them, and unfortunately, we didn't have them to play. You know, a lot of high elf role players were either just using human models back in the day or just mainly on Horde side using Blood Elf models. But now we have the customizations. So it's great to
Yeah.
see Blizzard moving on and adding in some cosmetics to make that playable and make it so we could act and role play as the things that we like and just have our characters look the way that we want them to look.
Right.
Instead
And
of just
you'll find that a lot of high elf role players are, using the Void Elf model now. Yeah, obviously, it would be great to have, all of the Blood Elf customizations pulled over. It'd be great to have the hair colors and the hairstyles. I'm from, the time where I remember using the reflecting prism. I remember farming the orb of the Rendorei from Magister's Terrace. I remember the pain of, if you use the toy and then you miss your 5-minute timer to prism, you're stuck with that human model. And there was even like, I think the High Guard did it where they made a list of where the human customizations when you used the orb would transfer over to like different hair colors and different hairstyles for whatever your blood elf form would be when you used the orb toy. So you could have a human with like black hair and like a long ponytail, and despite that not being what your high elf looked like, when you used the toy they'd have short hair and blonde hair. So I remember having to do that, and I will take whatever I can get. Having the Void Elf models now it's a godsend.
yeah, people really committed to the bit, as you'd say back in the day, like with the mirror toy, like you were saying, and then the orb of the Sindori. They would do everything that they could to make it so their character looked how they wanted them to look and be able to be a high elf. And now it's much easier because you could just play a void elf if you want to, and then you get all those awesome customizations instead of Blizzard going in and putting in yet another race into the game. We're just getting more and more customizations, like we've seen for many of the other races. They're getting a lot of customizations that could make them look like a different clan or subspecies of the race and stuff like that. So it's great to see that you guys are finally able to portray your character without that hassle. But the fact that people went through and made lists of like what transfers over to what is actually insane, and so much dedication. It's amazing to hear, honestly.
I don't want to imagine how long it took whoever made that list.
Oh, you know, someone was like sitting down, pulling out their hair, just frustratingly and painstakingly trying to do this. But then the vindication and the joy they must have felt at the end when they got it done and they saw their work put into practice by other people too. Oh, just
We thank them for that daily.
we do. We thank you for your service, whoever you are. Now, you were talking a lot about obviously the high elves through Warcraft 1 through 3, and then going through Northrend and all that stuff. Could you expand more about what makes you so passionate about the high elves?
Um, Other than those like leading threads into why I like them to begin with, that is what led me, I guess, even at all, to come to Moongard in the first place. And when I did come to Moongard, the first character I made, the first roleplay character where I learned everything and made my mistakes and had my fair share of cringe moments and everything, that first character I ever roleplayed was a high elf. And that's just, whenever, even now to this day, while I dabble, I always come back to it because where it is where some of the best story building and experience and just beyond experience, just experiences has come from. It just feels so like, it feels like so home. It feels home to me. It's one of the high elves are one of those classes that are so ingrained in the lore, in all of the forms, the ones they are now, and all the way back to, where they started with the highborn and everything. There's all of this room for improvement and expansion that is specifically coming from other people who are so passionate about this, this race. Blizzard, they give us what they can, and we take what we get. But outside of that, one of the community where I've seen the most expansion, specifically because fans love it and the story building has just gone rampant, has been with the high elves. And I love seeing that there are other people out there in their guilds and their friend groups who love the race as much as I do, that they are willing to make the story for people like me to be involved in.
Right. So, like you're saying, it feels like home. It feels right when you play them, right? Because you enjoy it
Right.
so much. You have seen them from where they are now, where they were back then to where they are now, and just how much, like you were saying, the community has built on them. But also, we see that Blizzard is sort of going back to those roots with the next 3 expansions. Obviously, Midnight, we're gonna get hopefully a lot more high elf lore and just elf lore in general. But it's just the horizon is endless for what we might see, and what players have done for the high elf community as a whole is amazing. So many people have put in a lot of work, as you were saying, and it's just good to see that even though we might not have the race as itself in game to play, like high elf isn't a separate race, there's still a community that's behind it, that's passionate for it, and that likes to play it, which is just a wonderful thing.
It's very wonderful, and I could sit here and this interview would become hours long if I were to tell you how excited I am for Midnight. And I will speak for every other high elf role player on the server. We are thrilled for Midnight. I've played every expansion since Wrath. I mean, it is the only the second expansion, but I've played them all at launch, and I've played through the story. I have not been as excited for an expansion as I am for Midnight. I'm already picturing the transmogs. I'm already picturing the story and the new towns and potentially, finally, better, more customizations and an expansion of classes, maybe. I'm waiting.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people that there is much excitement for Midnight. Some people who don't even play elves, everyone's just super stoked for it, and I think it's because there's a lot of mystery behind it. Obviously, we don't know a lot yet, and we don't know what we're gonna get class-wise, transmog-wise, customization-wise. But speaking of classes, now we do have a wide variety of classes in the game. I guess you could say they're kind of the typical fantasy game classes. But if you could pick a class to be added in for High Elves that doesn't come necessarily from World of Warcraft or the World of Warcraft RPGs, it could be any fantasy setting, what class would you like to see the High Elves get?
This one is absolutely easy, and it is from Warcraft. Druids. Druids, I know with high elves being from the void elf skin, it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense. The Blizzard would just, they'd say that the druid doesn't fit a void elf class or a void elf race, but that's why if in Midnight we get that, you transfer straight to high elves. Druids, because I believe with everything in me that Everwardens finally need to be made a true thing, especially considering that we have some mounts and pets in the game now that would do so well for druid forms for Everwardens.
It's funny that you say Druid, because Druid's been a very popular option so far, but I think I could see it, not only because they're elves, obviously, but because Blizzard's kind of going away from that aesthetic where certain races could only be certain classes based on like their culture or religious beliefs and stuff like that. Because obviously we have the Lightforged Draenei are able to be shadow priests and warlocks, and we got Minari customizations, and they could be paladins, and the Void Elves are able to be priests and all this sort of stuff. So I think we might eventually end up seeing a high elf druid. I don't think it's too far out of like the scope. Nature magic can be taught. We see it with the harvest witches in Gilneas, who are now full on druids, gameplay wise, anyways. So I definitely think it's a possibility, and it could be on the horizon. I know a lot of people are hoping for druids for a lot of classes, and Blizzard has said that they're trying to make every race be every class. So I'd say keep your hopes up.
I am absolutely keeping my hopes up, even though I know that Blizzard has said that Druid is the hardest one to do it with, because then they've also got to think about, the forms and everything.
Yeah.
They're moving towards, they've got some mounts and pets in the game now, and they're making, creatures for the new expansions and like things you'll find in the wild that aren't entirely out of the question, and they don't look so wrong that they couldn't be. So they're getting closer, and I don't even think they know they're getting closer.
All the
And I know
various- Oh,
I know Night Elves deserve their paladins. I'll say that. And I have a feeling that one will happen sooner than High Elf Druids.
most likely, yeah.
But I'm waiting for High Elf Druids, because once that happens, you will see me making 20 Ever Wardens, and I will not be stopped.
Hey, and you shouldn't be stopped. Make them all. I think the main reason why a lot of people do want druids is kind of something you mentioned, and that's the identity they get behind all their forms. Because each druid that we have in game obviously has very specific forms to their race in general, right? So the idea of what your race could get as a druid is just makes people excited, because then they get a really deep dive into what they think should be it, and everyone throws out different ideas, and it just brings people close when they're passionate about something. So druids is an amazing choice.
One of these days, my dreams will come true, and I will be here when they do.
That you will. Now with the high elves, like I've been saying throughout this entire interview, is they've been around from the beginning, right? From Warcraft 1 to now. So, out of all the high elf characters in the game, who's your favorite high elf lore character?
It seems sort of like maybe a cop out, and at the same time, it doesn't seem like it's viable, because the lore based around her is so very little. But I'd have to say Verisa, because Verisa Windrunner is the first high elf character that I actually got invested in the story for, because the first WoW book I actually read was Day of the Dragon, and that's also part of where my love for this high elf lore comes from, is because seeing her put in such a spotlight in that book was like, it's wow, high elves are pretty cool. They're shooting arrows and jumping everywhere, and they've got like everything in a race that I'd want to see. And Night of the Dragon was just as good. Verisa is the one I'm waiting for. Like, the other two Windrunner sisters have gotten their model updates, and come on, Midnight, Verisa needs a glow up pretty badly. I'm just hoping for it.
Verisa is the one that hasn't gotten the glow up yet, that's for sure. But I also don't think saying Verisa is a cop out. I think any choice is a valid choice, because we all have our own reasons behind it and why we like that character specifically. So Verisa's a good choice.
What makes a really good character to me is their potential, is not the lore they have or like anything that is making the character put in the spotlight. It is the potential for expansion on their lore. I love a character who you can see where they're going, but they've not gone there yet, rather than a character who's done it all. Verisa, she's got her lore. She's been crucial in a lot of the moving parts of everything. She's not one of those characters that stands in the spotlight, but I have a feeling as we move into midnight and where Quel'Thalas and the elves are going to take more of that forward standing position, I really, really hope, and especially with, knowing what happens at the beginning of the next expansion, I am really, really hoping that we see a model update would be great, but seeing expansion with her story, I think we've seen her and Ronan's kids once. I would love to see them in the lore more to actually, see some. We need a little bit more half elf representation too. So I would love to see that expansion take Verisa like it's taken Ilaria. Ilaria is just going off the rails with this development. I want the same for Verisa.
And I think we'll get it in midnight. I hope, anyways. And even if we don't get it in midnight, hopefully, well, not maybe if we don't get it in midnight, but maybe we'll get it before, towards the end of the War Within, going into midnight. You never know. But Verisa does need that glow up, and I'm sure the sky's the limit for her character development. Like you said, Illyria's character right now is just going from someone who had been gone for years, right? Years, gone, thought lost. We didn't know what happened. And then she came back, and she's just been thrown right into the mix of everything, right up front in the story. So the sky's the limit. You never know. And hopefully they do glow up for Verisa, and we see a lot more.
Here's to hoping. I can't wait for the fan art.
Me either. It's going to be great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rendorei, for taking the time to do this interview.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a blast.
It was our pleasure, and we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Rendorei race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Celeste, or in-game Celeste Rune Whisper. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We're going to get the ball rolling, move on to the next question. What made you choose Rendorei as your race?
Well, I absolutely love the story of the Void, and I've always loved the aesthetic of eldritch-like characters. It's a type of dark creepy that's just too good. So when they made Void Elves an actual playable race, your homegirl was thrilled.
For sure, it's kind of got that, I guess Lovecraftian vibe going on,
Yes, I absolutely adore it. I love the stars and all that.
It is a very nice aesthetic, for sure, which I think many people will probably agree with. I know the aesthetic is something that I very much like as well. Apart from that aesthetic and the glitz and glam that drew you to it, what makes you so passionate about the Rendorei?
Well, the aesthetic is a big part of it. Darkness, stars, deep seas, weird fish, anything distant and uncanny. The uncanny vibe was the big catalyst for me loving it so much. But also, on top of that, I've always adored the lore behind Void and the creatures that encompass it in World of Warcraft. It's such a huge part. Basically, everything that is major storyline has spawned from that kind of entity.
Yeah, the Void has really caused a lot of Azeroth's history to go awry and all the events to unfold, which, I mean, you must be excited for the next expansion then, because there's going to be a lot of Void stuff going on there with
Yes.
Xal'atath and all that.
I'm so excited for the next X-Packs because specifically that.
It's going to get to maybe give you even more than what we already had, expand the Void knowledge and what might come of it.
Yeah, I heard that they were changing Shadow Priests to Void Priests and really, really kind of focusing on that. And I can't wait to see what spells are looking like and how to play the class after.
That's actually a perfect segue into the next question, which has to do with classes. If the Rendorei could be any class, doesn't have to be just in World of Warcraft, it could be in any MMO fantasy type setting, what class would they be and which one would you pick?
Well, since Shadow Priest hits all of the buttons to the Void stuff, I'm very, very happy with it. But if I was to choose like a different class, believe it or not, druids.
So yeah, druids. You know, they might do like some void aspect with the druids for the Rendorei. Maybe I know they like to give druids their own special forms, so it'd be interesting to see what like a Rendorei druid might look like.
That's what I was thinking too. Like the the stag form maybe being the void chicken and all of that fun stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be canon or anything,
Yeah.
obviously, but it would just be just be cute aesthetic wise.
I could just think of like what kind of travel form they would have for the water. It'd be some weird Cthulhu Lovecraftian monster.
Yeah, like some sort of weird octopus or squid thing.
Exactly. Now, this next question, I guess, is a bit more difficult considering Rendorei is like obviously new and doesn't have that many, I guess, lore characters yet. But out of like all the Rendorei characters in game, do you have a favorite lore character?
I know that she's not technically a Rendorei, but she has the aesthetic, and I think I'm gonna choose Xalatath.
Yeah, that's a good
She's
pick.
got the looks, which is good for me, and also she was my favorite legendary weapon in Legion.
There
It's
you
so
go.
sassy and spooky.
Always talking mad like smack to you.
Mad smack. And I just can't wait to see what she's gonna do over the next couple of X packs. I hope she keeps that antagonistic role. I've been slightly disappointed with villains not being able to stay villains lately, so hopefully she can stay a villain.
Yeah, hopefully no more redemption arcs that we didn't want.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
We kind of had 2 last expansion. But
Yeah, it's
Xalatath-
okay to be a villain.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, you know? And Xalatath's a good choice. Might not technically be a Rendorei, but she kind of took the form of one and has the aesthetic, right? So
Exactly.
nothing beats those scar tattoos that she has.
Love the Naifu tattoos.
It's very wild, for sure. Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and we will see you at the race rep arena in the opening ceremonies.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is really fun and interesting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Draenei race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi. A lot of you guys might know me in the online space as Flizzle. He's the main character I use to run events these days, and also is my social media presence. But this right here is my character Yardoom, who is much more so my general roleplay character these days when it comes to most walk-up RP and events. So he's fairly well connected these days, and is equally an avatar of my being, I'd say.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. I'm going to roll on to the first question. What made you choose Draenei as your race?
Draenei are so deeply compelling to me, largely in a way simply because of the fact that I started to come of age around the time of Warlords of Draenor. That was my sort of late teenage time where I started to appreciate the lore and the story and the artistry that goes into this game, and Draenei were so critical to that expansion that it's hard, if you appreciate the artwork that went into that X-Pack, not to fall in love with the Draenei. Likewise, they're just such a unique race. A lot of people state that they largely resemble the equivalent of WoW's tieflings, as to our D&D, as are to D&D. WoW have the Draenei. But when you start to break down a lot of their core aesthetics and principles, they really diverge from other Tolkien-esque or generic fantasy races in a way that WoW didn't realistically have until the Burning Crusade. And I think that really makes them one of the most special things that this game has gifted to us and the fantasy medium as a whole.
Yeah, no, that is very true. I guess you could say up until Burning Crusade, WoW had a lot of like the, I don't want to say basic, but like the normal fantasy races that you see, like obviously humans, dwarves, orcs, elves, undead, that sort of thing. And then we got the Draenei, and they were like, "Whoa, what is this? This is like a breath of fresh air." You know, like they were so amazing to see introduced. Their stories have been great. They've had so many good characters. Warlords of Draenor is when I also like kind of dipped my toes in the Draenei a bit because it was like the big thing, right? You either went and made yourself an orc or you went and made yourself a Draenei to play at that time, especially for RP because those scenes were popping off way back then. But no, yeah, Tiefling. That's not a comparison I've heard, but I see it, and I definitely think that is true.
It's really interesting because a lot of the artists that I follow share a lot of common references for both Draenei and Tiefling, and people who generally are just fans of fantasy art often mistake one for the other. But because we are in a game that has so much story and so much world building when it comes to things like architecture and culture, it's hard for us to perceive the fact that, yeah, they're both unnaturally skinned humanoids with tails and hooves and horns, and were inspired by sort of demonic imagery, tieflings more overtly, but also Draenei through the Eridar, who were initially the most big bad demons of the Warcraft universe before we got the sort of retcon to their existence. It's crazy how people don't seem to realize just how different our perceptions of races are as Warcraft fans outside of just the general fantasy osmosis that exists.
Yeah, for real. Like as you said the demon stuff, I was thinking this like both Tiefling and Draenei are demonic, and then you said it, and like Flizzle reading my mind out here. You could tell that they're both like derived from that same demonic presence. But on the topic of this, before we just skip the question and dive into it, because you are very passionate, what makes you so passionate about the Draenei?
I think that overall, compared to many of the races that exist in the game, Draenei have a lot of diversity, and specifically the Outland Azerothian Draenei, as opposed to the Draenei of the Lightforged, which I also love the aesthetics of. I do not want to send any sort of dissatisfaction towards our fellow Lightforged reps in our community. They are all lovely. I've roleplayed with many of them. But the Draenei of Outland have such a diversity in the different classes that they get to play. My character is an Auchenai, something that is so core to Draenei, sort of like the worship and the recognition of death as a subject matter, which is something you don't really see outside of things like the Darkspear Trolls and Bwonsamdi. Outside of that, obviously, shamanism is huge to the Draenei, and we don't really have another race that has both holy light and shamanistic aesthetics in it outside of probably the dwarves. But even then, the dwarvish paladin lore is more so. I don't want to say underdeveloped in comparison to the Draenei, but Draenei paladins are so iconic and archetypical. And that diversity, even nowadays, warlocks are kind of a commonality in the Draenei roleplay scene now that Monterey exists. There's just so many choices you get to make. Were you from Argus? Were you from one of the worlds in between? Were you from Outland? Have you become broken? Have you always been a Monterey, or have you been Fel infused by sort of Sargerai powers? There's even the alternate universe. Draenei have such a beautiful diversity to them in that they can have so many different class and cultural aesthetics that you're really just spoiled for choice. And it's hard to not find something that you're so passionate about and in love with when you look at the whole gambit.
You do have like a lot of layers going into the Draenei of what you can pick and choose from, which is amazing. A lot of races unfortunately don't have that. So, like you said, there's a lot of different avenues that you could go down for the Draenei. There's so much to pick and choose from. And for the comparison of like dwarf paladin culture compared to Draenei paladin culture, I don't even think it's the difference between the cultures of paladins in general, but it's like the difference in just their cultural culture as a whole, because like the Draenei are very light focused, devout. So much of it is the light. Obviously, like many people in Azeroth follow it, but it's just so deeply ingrained with Draenei that it's basically everywhere, right? So it's just where to pick with Draenei. There's so much stuff.
think that you've actually hit the nail on the head, where there's a lot of races that have the option of being holy light focused or shaman focused or warlock focused. And those are really interesting character choices that you get to make about your character. I'm not saying that a culture has to prescribe to those powers in the cosmos to necessarily allow you to choose them, but it's also interesting when you don't get to just respond to your character's personal interests and beliefs upon reality, and instead also get to interface those beliefs with the belief of a greater culture that isn't so, how shall we say, agnostic towards the different options that you have as a member of faith or community, whether that be arcane based or light based or nature based.
I completely agree. Honestly, it's just there's so much. My brain's on overload. There's that much.
Of course, yeah.
Now we were talking about Warlords of Draenor and how that's like kind of what started off your Draenei experience, and that was a lot of your older WoW experience. Prior to Draenor, I don't really think we had many, apart from like Velen. We didn't really have many front and center Draenei's, but then obviously Draenor comes into play, and then every expansion since we've kind of got some Draenei love, right? So, with all of that being said, who's your favorite Draenei lore character?
I'm gonna have to cheat here a little bit. I've always been a fan of secondary lore characters, people who are just a tier below the most critical leaders of the race. I've always been a much bigger fan of Darius Crowley instead of Gen Greymane, and in that way, one of the few secondary Dronic lore characters we got at the start of Burning Crusade is Nobundo. He's a broken Drana, he's cool, but I remember doing like a eighth grade book report on the story Unbroken before Warlords even came out, because I didn't want to read anything that was long enough be a real story. And ever since then, the Crokul have just fascinated me. I love the idea of a culture of people who have had their core faith stripped from them, not only metaphysically, but like physically in their bodies. And beyond that, they're able to grow and change and develop and find new ways and teach those who weren't as broken as them. You could rattle off a whole list of other Draenei characters, and I will tell you, I probably adore them. This character here, Yardum, is heavily based off of Exarch Maladar, both his appearance in the original Burning Crusade as well as Warlords of Draenor, and even some of the stuff that we've recently got in the Draenei Heritage questline, which was gorgeous, was wonderful. I'm so glad I got the chance to speak to the dev who worked on that. Brilliant writer, amazing creator. I just want to keep sending out the love now that I've gotten an opportunity to do it. And yeah, overall, I gotta say, Nobundo has to be my favorite, but at the end of the day, every single one has such lovely voice lines and characterizations and aesthetics that are so diverse and beautiful in the way we were describing. Um, it's hard to pick a favorite child.
I think Nobundo is probably one of the greatest choices you could have picked, not only because it's one of the OG Draenei characters that we've seen, but the Broken as a whole. I think a lot of people would agree with me when when I say that we wanted to see them as the allied race. You know, like people just love Broken no matter what part of RP they come from. Anytime I talk to somebody and I talk about Broken, they're like, yeah, we should have got that. We love Broken. We love the whole backstory behind them. And yeah, no, Nobundo's great.
Yeah, we were talking about my Warlords of Draenei RP. It was, I never even roleplayed a Draenei. I only played my broken character. There's some ancient interviews with him up online from old WoW roleplay personalities. I wouldn't even know how to find them, but yeah. Well, hey, let's start hoping we get those customization options. And then maybe 2-3 years we can get a campaign for a broken rep at TOA.
You never know what's possible. There's so many more customization options that are coming in that are making it so allied races don't even have to be implemented, right? You could just go in, click a couple buttons, and all of a sudden your character looks completely different, which I think is the best way going forward. I don't really think we need any more playable races. We have enough as is, so the customizations would be nice.
No, I'm right there with you. There's this character create screen's too big. We gotta shrink that down.
It is quite expansive, isn't it? Now, Draenei have the option of having majority of the classes unlocked, like most races are getting nowadays in World of Warcraft. At one point, that used to be a rarity where you'd be like, my race has more class than you. So with that being said, with all the classes they have, what class would you like to see them get, and which one would you want to be?
If you go online on Twitter, on ArtStation, all these places, you will see countless gorgeous fan works of Draenei druids. I've always been a druid player. My first character was a druid. My second character was a druid, and that second character is still my content main to this day. Me and Balanced Druid are joined at the hip. And while I wouldn't have expected me to say that I would really, really crave to see a Draenei Druid in the forefront, I just want to say, like, the wonderful community that surrounds WoW artistry in general and Draenei in specific have really sort of thrust that to my forefront. I'm still a firm believer that Draenei and orcs should have been demon hunters. Uh, Shout out to elves. Again, I'm not going to send any hate out today. You guys are lovely, but some of us want to get a different option here and there. Um, if I had to pick one race that I said that I would feel most is synergistic with the Draenei, and I'm a sucker for synergy, so that's got to be my answer to your follow-up question. It's complicated because for the longest time, the most important thing about Draenei was that they were the Alliance Shaman race, and Shaman were kind of in the forefront of Draenei promotional art. The original Prophet Velen card for the TCG actually listed him as a Shaman incorrectly to help push this narrative. But ever since Warlords, we've been seeing Draenei Paladin more and more and more. And even you could argue nowadays, Warlock is now on the table through Arzal and Felomon and all these new characters. So they have both a few distinct eras of iconic class choices, as well as multiple that are just so critically important. Hard to pick. My other Draenei is a shaman. This one's a paladin. But well, there's a reason this is the character I chose to have interviewed today, so I would have to say paladin.
It's funny that you bring up Druid, because Druid probably has been one of the most like named classes that people want their race to be, and I think a lot of that probably has to do with not only the Druid aesthetic, but just the fact that you get all these special different kinds of shape-shifting forms, right? So like the stag form for Draenei might be a Talbuck or something like that, you know? And that just brings a whole different, I think, interesting perspective to the class as a whole. But paladins are the OGs in my mind when I think of Draenei, even though it is shaman. I just, you know.
It's so funny because the really interesting thing about Druid is with all of those different forms you get to pick, it says something about your race. Same thing with Shaman and their totems and Paladin and their mounts, but the thing with druids is, it says something that an orc's cat form is a wolf. It says something that, let's say, a mechanome's bear form is a mechano bear. So you get to express your love for that race through the core mechanics of the class, and all the different beautiful model work that goes into it. And I feel like that's part of the reason why it's so popular. It's just a fun thing to think about. If my goblin could be druid, what would his bear form be? Would it be a crab? Would it be a rat? Would it be an axe beak? Who knows? It's just a fun question, and who doesn't love brainstorming about one of our favorite games?
Exactly, and everybody that I talk to when we bring up druids of other races that don't have it, it's immediately what forms are they going to get, and everyone immediately gets into this happy spot of deep diving with their friends and trying to figure it out. It just it brings people together, you know. Druids for some reason. I think it's because we all secretly really love druids, but everyone plays different classes. But they're like, I wish I could be a druid. So
Listen, we are every role under the sun. It's hard. It's hard to be on top.
it really is. You guys have a lot of roles, but that's what makes the class great. With that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. Yardoon, I was going to call you Flizzle.
You actually did earlier in the interview, but it's fine.
Oh.
I'm glad that I introduced myself as Flizzle,
There you
so
go.
everybody understands. I'm also glad that I pronounced it Yardoom really early on because Jardum follows me like a haunting specter. But it's lovely catching up with you, man. It's always great talking to you, Odron. I'm glad that I got an opportunity to do so in front of an audience, even. Um, yeah, it's been a lovely chat.
Awesome, and we'll see you at the opening ceremonies with the rest of the race reps. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Lightforged Draenei race rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Desigal. I'm the Tournament of Ages Lightforged race rep this year, and I'm really excited to be here, actually.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I greatly appreciate it. And we will jump into the first question right away if you're ready to go.
Wonderful. Sure.
Perfect. So, what made you choose the Lightforge as your race?
Oh, well, I originally came from growing up on StarCraft, and here with Azeroth, the Draenei are pretty much World of Warcraft Protoss. Same game company, all that. And I used to main just like a regular Draenei for roleplay, for years. But then they gave us glowing ones, and I was all over that. And they gave us these Lightforged. They looked amazing. These soldiers from the stars, and I had all these story ideas just related. And once I got him rolling, I didn't take him very seriously, but he just became so beloved to myself, everyone around me. I just haven't gone back to regular Draenei. I'm Lightforged. I'm in it. I'm committed.
That's totally fair. I mean, what's better than a glowing space marine? Am I right?
I know, right? It's like you get to be a Draenei, but shiny.
But
Very
bedazzled,
shiny.
right?
I love my bedazzle.
But it's cool that you saw that and you drew inspiration and clicked with the whole StarCraft aspect of it. There's probably some people who don't even put two and two together that oh, it's Blizzard and now
Probably.
there's space goats that are basically Protoss, like you were saying, right?
Yeah,
And-
probably. And I know that StarCraft is not a kid-friendly game, but I did grow up on it, and I turned out mostly okay. So there was that, and I know when I first heard about the Protoss story, I was really intrigued by them, and then I started seeing the Draenei story kind of opening up with the Burning Crusade, and my interest kind of started coming in with the quest line around the Path of Glory, and then they just opened up this whole storyline, especially with Legion, and then they gave us the shiny goats, and I just was so involved.
It sounds like there's a lot that you want to touch on, so I'm going to jump into what makes you so passionate about this race, because I'm really excited to
man.
hear what you're going to say.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. This character initially started so I came from regular Draenei roleplay, and then the shiny ones came out, and this character was an idea I had based as a family member, related, all that, kind of fun stuff. And he came out with the set personality, the set base condition of a character, all your basics, but he was very blank in the storyline department because I didn't take him all that seriously. He is very straightforward kind of guy, no filter, says his honest thoughts and opinions in a very as-is condition. And it's often to a point of just complete tactlessness, attitude. This guy can be kind of mean, not gonna lie. And I was expecting him to not be very well received. But I don't think I've actually ever had a complaint about him. I thought he was gonna be poking some hornets nest here, but everybody was they would whisper me after roleplay, be like, dude, I love this guy. I want to know where he goes. And I was like, oh, snap, there's something to this guy. I need to finish this. I need to do my homework. So after he started making his rounds, and he started getting some art, and that art right here I made. And I started doing like all the like research. I had to like brush up on the Draenei story stuff, and then I had to like start learning about, you know, the Lightforged and Blizzard. I love them, but they gave us this race of people with such a history and story and lore, and I loved it, but it came with so many unanswered questions, changing answers, vague information, or like just none at all. Even like some retcons, and like that's confusing, right? And I spent hours like of research putting together like a timeline, a whole document of like his backstory, information, what fits where. And I just learned so much, and the more I learned about them, the more I was like, I don't think I could play anybody else.
That's totally fair, and it's such Blizzard to be like, here's a bunch of lore. We're not going to tell you any more about it, give you any answers. Oh, and we're going to retcon a big portion of it and then change it so it's even more confusing. Like, that's just traditional Blizzard.
And then we're just not going to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's cool to see.
So, like,
Oops, sorry.
it is.
Go ahead. Yeah,
No, go ahead.
It's cool to see like your no nonsense kind of silly little guy end up getting like so much love and then character growth and like development through that, because I feel like a lot of the good characters are just like characters that we don't go in all serious like with, you know, we're just gonna mess around on these guys and then see where it goes from here. And a lot of times the character growth and just the character itself ends up becoming like larger than life in a sense, and you get a good fun time out of it and the story turns out great. So that's just, it's amazing to see stuff like that.
Oh, it really is. And I know that like what little information or vague information that they give us is like, it's a challenge, you know? It's this big daunting task for new players who might want to like play a Lightforged or even just a regular Draenei, and it's like no wonder that there's not a lot of us. But gosh, you know, the possibilities, like you can imagine whole worlds, you can come up with all these stories that happen during the time skip, the daily life in between the stars, like the battle stories you could write. Like there's so much creative freedom within, you know, the reason of Blizzard. And I do wish I saw that tapped into more. Like, I want to see what people are doing. I want to see what they can come up with, you know?
I want to see more of like the Lightforge from the like Army of the Light, instead of like people who I guess just strictly go off of, this is a brand new Lightforge that just went through all these trials and tribulations that became a Lightforge.
Yeah,
like there's so much stuff to tap into, right? Like you were saying.
I do see that. Like most of the Lightforge I see are like, you know, more recent, and I do kind of get like why they're doing that, because, you know, it's this huge timeline of uncertain information, and they probably just don't know how to write with that, how to figure it out. But you know, a little googling here and there, or ask your, you know, local Lightforge players like some questions, and gosh, there's a lot of possibilities. And
it's just
like,
like blank creative slate, right? That you could just
it
kind
is,
of
and
like make up your own thing and be like, oh, he went to like this planet and that planet and fought like these battles and then came here with like Terrellian and all them.
Oh, it is. And like, I just think like with Draenei specifically and Lightforge, there's this really big creative opportunity. Like, on one hand, it's a little frustrating they didn't answer some fairly simple questions, like, you know, we don't really know how specifically a Draenei matures, how long it takes, you know, like those kinds of questions. But you can just like make up all kinds of stuff and reasonably get away with it. I think that's just fun. I think it's great. There's not as many people tapping into that as I would have liked to see, but you know, I think it's a great opportunity, and I think people are just a little maybe afraid to take on that big of a challenge of creative writing or research, and it's a whole thing, and I get it, but we did end up with the better end of the heritage armor, so I'm just saying.
That is very true. It is a very nice set.
We got the nice one.
And I mean, I could see the intimidation factor behind like going to like tapping into all this uncertain lore and stuff, right? And how some people might be worried that they'll be judged based on their like TRPs or anything like that, because Like people
Yeah.
do that, unfortunately, quite often. But there is so much you could tap into. However, I'm going to move on to our next question because if not, we could be here probably all night talking about this.
I could go into it for hours.
Which is great. We'll have to talk more after the interview for sure. But so the Draenei have a pretty wide variety of classes. However, if you could give them a WoW class that they do not have, either from the game itself or the non-canon RPG books, or perhaps even from any fantasy setting or universe out there, what class would you like to see them get?
Okay. It is in the World of Warcraft. I want druids, and like I know how that can. I don't know a lot about druids and like night elves and stuff. Like that's not specifically something I know a lot of, but to me it makes sense because, I mean, I feel like by now races everywhere are kind of sharing information. They're learning new ways, learning new talents, and I think by now Draenei would kind of start being able to get into being druids. But like the whys and the hows aren't exactly like it's the animal forms. like okay, hear me out. It can go for both Life Force and normal Draenei, but like I would explode if the cat form was the cute little Marsul that you see on Argus with changeable skin variations and pets, because they already have a like fell corrupted Marsul. You could just change it up, make it light.
Yeah, for sure. They're
Talbot.
like the forms are probably the thing that the people like the most about druids and like to sit down and talk with their friends, right? Because it's just you never know what you might get, and each race gets their own custom form. So it's just like
Yeah.
this is the best option for every like race because you have a unique class specific to them, much like shamans. Shamans have specific totems, right?
Oh gosh, yes, shamans would be wonderful too, but like animal forms, sky fins for flying, or the Talbot for travel form, and like your little tree could be like on the theme of like being a crystallized tree. And I'm a little blank on the bear form, but all the others I gotta figure it out.
Yeah, bear form's a tough one for them, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
like most races probably would just get an actual bear, because like bears are pretty like standard everywhere across Azeroth, and like a lot of zones have their own specific bears, right? Like there's tainted bears, there's regular bears, there's snow bears, there's like all this kind of stuff.
I know there's like this kind of like alien-ish looking bear. You can kind of see him more around like Shadowlands stuff though. But I think they started pulling that model around for just your generic alien bear kind of thing, and that would probably work.
Alien Bear sounds like one of those really bad B-rate horror movies. Just like Attack of the Alien Bear.
I would watch it. I would probably watch it.
A lot of people probably would, honestly. Druid's actually, by the way, been our most popular pick. I think
Really?
out of all the interviews we've done, there's probably been 11 people who have said Druid.
Oh, God.
So
Well,
it's
they're-
definitely winning.
They're on this trend of like opening classes to all races, and I know that like sparks some controversial tune creations, and that is to each their own. Like they can do what they want to do. I'll just stay over here. But gosh, I'm looking forward to the introduction of druids, because like it'll be a thing eventually, right?
It'll
rest of
probably
them?
take them a long time, and it'll be one race at a time, most likely, since they'll literally have to come up with like a thing for everyone. I know like the dwarf players are dying to have druids so they could roleplay like Wildhammer druids and stuff, but
Oh my god, that would be
yeah.
wonderful.
it's
It would be hilarious to see gnomes, because they could have like smaller forms.
Oh
I think that would
man,
be adorable.
that would be pretty hilarious for sure.
It would be a little house cat.
Now, since Legion, when we were first introduced to the Lightforge, though we didn't get to play them right away, there have been many characters that were introduced. Many old characters, many new characters. I'd say more new characters than old. By old, I kind of just mean like Terralion and Illyria. Illyria. But out of all the Lightforged Draenei that we got introduced to, who's your favorite lore character for the Lightforge?
Oh gosh, I know it's like I don't know if like Terralion technically counts. I mean, he must, because he's not actually like. It's a controversial take, but I don't like Terralion.
No, that's
I
fine.
think
We'll
he's
steer away
fine.
from him.
I think he's fine as a character, and I like him a lot better than most in the Blizzard world. But they gave us these really cool alien space soldiers, and they represented us with a human, and
Yeah.
I'm a little bitter about that. Whoops.
It's all
And-
good.
And like, I get it, the story for Trally and yada yada. Yeah. But I like the face of our glowy space goat theme to be like in the circle. Like, it could have been Captain Faria. That would have been great. But who it should have been, my favorite, is Tepartos.
Tepartos, yes.
Tepartos.
Oh.
I think Tepartos for War Chief, Tepartos for King of Stormwind. I'm in it,
Tepartos is gonna unite Azeroth under his banner.
Just give him a gun and like all problems would be solved.
Doesn't even need that. He's got a giant ship with a laser beam.
You could probably just flex at the new threat of Azeroth and all gone. Problem solved.
That Teparthos storyline was hilarious, honestly.
Oh my
It
God,
was so great.
That is one of like the storylines, even like outside of playing Lightforge, throughout all my questing and playing World of Warcraft since it came out. I always remember that storyline with Tepartos. It just lives in the back of my head rent free.
Yeah, I mean, those little small storylines that are kind of like just nonsensical and like funny little stories, I feel like stay with us the
Yeah.
most because we actually enjoy them, and then we're like, wow, that was hilarious and such a neat little thing. But then that neat little thing stays with us longer than some of the big things.
Absolutely. And I was like, I want more of it, It doesn't even have to be from Tepartos, even though it should be, but just more of those like little tidbits inside of like this character's particular story, and make it fun, make it funny, make it unique, and he just sticks with me. I got so excited to see him during the Draenei Heritage Armor quest. He's just chilling at the party with everybody.
He's just there. He's like, I'm Tepartos. I'm here.
Yes, and I was like, yes, this quest has been made perfect.
With his part in it, it's been the best quest line.
He completed the storyline.
So good. Oh my god. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Thank you for having me. And like, sorry if I like rambled a little bit.
You're fine.
I got a little into it.
It was great. I enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone else will enjoy it. And we will see you, along with all the other race reps, at the opening ceremonies.
I am so excited for it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Tournament of Ages Alliance Dracthyr Race Rep interview. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Owlkin. The character that I play is named Ella Gobos. They also go by Eggy, which everyone seems to enjoy.
Well, Eggy, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I'm going to jump right into the first question, which is, what made you pick Dracthyr as your race?
So, when the Dracthyr were first released, I instantly fell in love with them because I have a little bit of a bias towards dragons. So as soon as I saw them, I immediately went to the character creation and started fiddling with them, and just fell in love since I saw them, even though I knew nothing about them lore-wise.
I feel like that's a common consensus across a lot of the board for Dracthyr players, where we all were like, dragons? Wait, what? And all like the dragon people who were playing dragons for years are like, finally, and like all got
That was
their
me.
time
That
of
was
day.
me.
Exactly. And then we knew nothing about them right away until we got those like YouTube videos that Blizzard puts out before expansions and stuff like that. And then it's kind of like, this story is pretty cool. Not gonna lie, like they were warriors made by the Earth Warder, and then they were put into stasis for like 20,000 years, and they fought and all this stuff, and now we have them, and they're just like, who, what, when, where am I? And they're trying to like find themselves, and we get that through like the Visions quest and everything. They're just an interesting basket.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
So with all that interestingness inside that basket. Why don't you start pulling it all out and tell us what makes you so passionate about playing a Dracthyr?
So you kind of summed it up very well. At first it was like just their appearance, but like as their lore kind of came out and like as we learned more about them, you realize that it's actually kind of sad. I read the book War of the Scaleborn, so like there you can kind of see a little bit of their creation and the thought process behind making them. And you kind of learn that they're these experiments that um they're mostly seen as tools at the very beginning. They didn't have any individuality. They didn't have anything to them besides the fact that they were soldiers that had only one purpose, and that was to kill the primal dragons and like the primalists. But as like after Dragonflight and the more recent patches that came out, you kind of learn that they do have individuality, and they want to know their individuality. They don't know who they are. They had one purpose, and they want to figure out who they are. So it's kind of like just like dealing with a mental battle of like you're gone for 20,000 years. Like the world moved on without you. Like their whole thing is just kind of sad. So being able to see them grow and like it's touching to see them grow as characters and see what people can do with them outside of that soldier mindset.
Right, and like during that 20,000 years of being in stasis, they come out, like you were saying, they kind of need to find their individuality. They don't know how to, but a lot of that individuality is shown through their visage forms that Rathian tells them they're able to, get.
Mhm.
So a lot of them are like, oh man, okay, so how do I go about doing this? What do I want my visage form to represent? How do I want to show myself? And a lot of them find it out pretty quick, as we see, but then there's some who are still struggling and don't know if it's right that they should have a visage form to express who they are and that they are soldiers and that's what they should be. So it's interesting to see their story unfold and how I guess Dracthyr as a whole are developing, right, across
Yeah,
the story as
I
we know
very
it.
much agree.
And one of the cool things, which leads into the next question, is we've been told that Evoker isn't going to be the only class that Dracthyr are going to be able to be, potentially, down the road, right? There's like hints and rumors and all that stuff in the Twitterverse. So if the Dracthyr were able to get other classes, what class would you like to see them get?
So I'm a little bit of a druid fiend. I have like so many druids. So obviously like I would love a Dracthyr druid. Because the idea of like after like seeing like the Zandalari dino cat forms and stuff like that, I was like, they have the ability to make non cat or non mammal looking forms. So like when they thought of like, oh, originally it was just Evoker, but then they're saying that they could possibly do more. I'm like, I want to see some dragon style stuff, especially seeing the new mount that just came out, the dragon owl. I was like, my hopes are high, but if Eggy were to be a different class, they'll most likely be a mage, but I would definitely make a Dracthyr druid.
And with Druid, they could really tap into a lot of their green dragon aspect magic, right? Like a lot of the nature-based stuff that we see some of the Evoker specs have, right? They use green dragon healing magic.
Yeah, the preservation.
The preservation of nature and life. And obviously for mages, they could just tap into that blue dragon arcane magic that they're so famous for. Druid's a good choice. Druid is a very common answer so far among all of our interviewees. I think it's because everybody
want more forms. We want more animal forms.
That's literally it. Everybody just is so curious as to what their race's form would be, and because there's an individuality, right, with that class between them, like druids, them being druids, and shamans, because shamans get individual totems, right, for their race.
Yeah,
So
dragon totems would be really cool.
would be probably made out of like dragon bones or something, but a lot of people just are able to find some common ground with, I guess, trying to figure out what forms they would get for druids, and that makes everybody all happy, and we get into these big conversations of like, oh, it should be this or that. So I have nothing in my brain right now for what a dragon druid form would be, so just the thought of it is sending my gears into overtime, and I think smoke's coming out of my ears right now. So that would be really interesting to see, for sure.
Maybe it'll happen. Maybe it'll happen.
One
I'm
day.
hoping.
One day.
Druids for all.
Yeah.
That's my petition.
One day everyone will have druids and night elves will finally get paladins, but that's a topic for another
That will never happen.
Yeah, Sag. We just get taunted in our class hall every time. But
Yep.
So Dracthyr are our newest race that's playable, right, as of Dragonflight, which is already come and gone. Sad times. But
Don't remind me, I'm so depressed.
through Dragonflight and through the Dracthyr, we've been introduced to a lot of interesting characters. A lot of the scale commanders, a lot of the minor characters, a lot of the just dragons in general. But specifically for Dracthyr, do you have a favorite Dracthyr lore character?
I like them all. And there's like not also like specifically Dracthyr. Like there's not a whole lot of options that aren't like necessarily like the mainstream ones, because that's all we have right now. But if I really had to like pick one, I would most likely kind of bite right on the nose and say Emberthal. But the reason I would pick her is because she's shown as this persistent Dracthyr that wants to do best by her kin, showing incredibly like loyalty, compassion, persistence, determination, even to those that see her as the enemy, like Sarkareth did. She did not want to hurt him. She wanted to find a common ground. She knew that her kin was all that they had left, and she didn't want to like destroy that. She was really like big on family and the kin, so that's probably one of my biggest things that I liked about her, was that despite everything that World of Warcraft would say, she didn't want that fight. She wanted everybody to be together again, because that's all they had.
You know, as I was asking this question, getting ready to hear your answer, the first thing that came through my brain was I'd pick Emberthal, because I don't really know any of the other Dracthyr, and she's the one that we see the most of. And then you were like,
yeah, I feel like it's
Emberthal.
a little bit on the nose. I don't know, like seeing her in like the animation, seeing her through like different views of like kind of like you imagine like these leaders of war, of leaders of like these different Werns, like you expect them to kind of be like all like tough, like I forget the Scale Commander that is blue, I forget his name off the top of my head, but like she shows compassion. She doesn't really like have that stern side to her, unless it's really needed, and like I honestly can, that's like I like that.
Yeah, she definitely has all the qualities of a leader for the Dracthyr, because she deeply cares about her people, right? From what we've seen, she wants to protect them. She wants them to go in a direction that isn't just Neltharin's dark legacy that so many Dracthyr are clawing at and thinking that they deserve. Where I don't think a lot of them know his legacy past the like pre-madness part of Neltharin, right?
I don't even think they really truly knew who he was, because like their ideas were kind of fogged by the gauntlet that was controlling them, so I don't really think they had a chance to even fully understand, besides like this is their creator, this is their father, so that's where their loyalty stands.
There was an undying loyalty that they couldn't help but have because of the gauntlet, right? And we see that in the fact that in order to become a scale commander, they have to go into like this cave that they could die in, right? And then
Yeah.
we see the bones being reincarnated. Some of them are still like, I could win, Father. I could be good to you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, buddy, I'm sorry, but you're kind of past your prime in a sense. Like,
Yeah.
Tavon's looking at you like, those are some yummy bones right now. Yeah, it's a bit of a sad story, but yeah, no, Emberthal definitely top choice right there for sure.
She was also one of the very few that actually have a visage form. There's a whole quest about it.
Yeah, you're the one that
Chose not to have one.
Yeah, she's the one who we have to go through and try and convince to get a visage form, right?
Yeah, and then she's like, I'm perfectly happy with how I look. This is who I am.
Yeah, exactly. This is real. This is me.
I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly.
I won't sing the full lyrics because that's a copyright.
Well, you know, Eggy, this has been a great interview, so I want to say thank you once again for taking the time to do this. I had a lot of fun, and I think we learned a lot of Dracthyr stuff from you.
I love dragons.
Well, I will definitely talk to you more about dragons, but we will see you and all the other race reps at the opening ceremonies for the Tournament of Ages.
Can't wait. Hopefully I don't mess up. I can't wait.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the 2024 Tournament of Ages race rep interviews. The Tournament of Ages is a week-long charity-based event at the Argent Tournament Grounds in Northrend from August 4th through 10th. Events start at 7 p.m. CST and go until 12 a.m. CST. The Tournament of Ages aims to help provide charity money to the Blessings in a Backpack organization, which in turn helps provide school-age children with meals on the weekends. Thank you so much, everyone. You could donate via the QR code on the screen or the link below, and we will catch you at the Tournament of Ages.